Leaders' questions. Deputy Derek Cleary on behalf.
Minister, the Government and all of us share the aim of creating more jobs and resolving the unemployment crisis. That is the collective aim of every party and none in this House. In 2011, in the mini-budget, Minister Noonan announced an initiative to create jobs in the hospitality industry by reducing the VAT rate at the time from 13.5% to 9%. There are various figures as to the success of this initiative. That provided by the Restaurant Association of Ireland points out to 9,000 new jobs in their sector alone. The CSO confirmed an increase of 13.3% in employment in accommodation and food services, which equated to a net increase of 15,200 jobs since the introduction of the initiative in the overall hospitality and tourism sector. Everybody acknowledges this is an initiative that has worked, that has provided opportunity for 15,200 people who otherwise may be still on the live register, who otherwise maybe have left the country, like so many others, and has provided substantial savings in social welfare bill and in other bills that would have accrued. So it's hard to believe that this initiative, while so successful, is now about to be pulled from under the rug of the very industry that's creating employment. Why would you even consider reversing an initiative that has created so many jobs? As late as yesterday evening in this House, Minister Noonan gave a very strong indication that he was considering doing that. Somewhat bizarrely, he said when he reduced the VAT rate, he hadn't received one representation to do so, that it was all his own idea. And this is from a government that promised 100,000 new jobs over its 5-year lifetime. He described it as a pump priming exercise, and in his idea, the notion of pump priming is that when something is weak, you give it a break to make it stronger, and then when it's strong, let it fend for itself. This sector depends on our domestic economy as well as on our visitors, and we know that our domestic economy cannot be called strong, in spite of what are very early green shoots.
Thank you.
So, Minister, I'm asking you why the Government is even considering reducing an initiative that has created 15,000 extra jobs, an initiative that was, if you increase the VAT rate, will seriously damage the value perception of our tourism industry, the one area where we can get further job creation.
Thank you, Deputy.
Can I thank Deputy Cleary for the acknowledgement of the success of the initiative taken by Government. This was a decision the Government made within 100 days of coming to office. Faced with an extraordinary financial situation, with no flexibilities at all, we determined we would put together a €500 million stimulus package. And because we didn't want to dissipate that, the decision of Government at the time was to focus that money on the hospitality sector as one that could be impacted immediately in terms of job creation. The Deputy is right, that has been a success. There are many other sectors now. The agriculture sector, you can see from what's going on at the Ploughing Championship this week, there's a sense of positivity about it. There are other sectors of our economy too that now are feeling an uplift because of government policies. There is a certain irony in the Deputy demanding the prolongation now of an initiative that he denounced and his party denounced at the time. Not only did they denounce the job stimulus plan after 100 days of government of this government, but also denounced the funding mechanism, because if you recall, it was funded by a levy on pension funds. So you can't will the result and welcome the result and deny the means. So I presume now you have belatedly acknowledged that the decisions of government within 100 days of coming to office to focus a sectoral job creation, a job creation effort that now has demonstrably created at least 15,000 additional jobs by your own admission, was the correct policy decision at that time. And certainly in the context of the next budget, obviously everything is on the agenda again. We will make the right decisions in budget for budget 2014 as we made within 100 days of coming to office, and no doubt you will denounce them as you did at the start of our term.
Deputy Cleary.
Thanks, Minister, for not answering the question. We denounced the method of funding because it was pension levy not just on rich pensioners, on small pensioners such as those in Tara Mines in Navan. It was on the very lowest paid pensioners that had to pay. We didn't denounce the initiative. Any initiative that creates jobs is welcome. And I won't take a lecture from any Labour minister on denouncing, given your record in opposition. But let's see this. Fáilte Ireland for Minister Varadkar and Minister Ring published a study in August which said that the jobs created equated to a benefit to the Exchequer of €55 million. They further estimated that the Exchequer tax take on growth in spending by overseas visitors was worth €40 million. They said the tax foregone through the implementation of the initiative was far beneath what the Minister for Finance is saying. So the Minister for Finance is saying it costs more than he said it would. The Minister for Tourism is saying it costs less than he said it would. What is the Minister for Public Expenditure saying? As the Minister who will introduce the budget side of things. And secondly, Minister, it has created jobs, and I acknowledge that. We want to keep those jobs in local communities, in home-owned, domestic-owned businesses around the country. And if the Labour Party, I'll give you, Deputies Phelan, Deputies Nolan and Deputy Griffin brought it to the floor of the House here last night to maintain the 15,000 jobs, and you now have the opportunity to commit your party to that in the way your backbenchers did last night.
I'd ask the chorus to remain quiet while people are speaking. Thanks very much.
I would again thank Deputy Cleary for more forcibly and more convincingly than we could praise ourselves, underscore the success of the sectoral strategy taken by this government that he denounced early on in our term of office. We are pursuing as the first priority of government. It will be the first priority of the next budget and of all our decisions for the remaining 2.5 years of this government, the creation and maintenance of jobs. And we will focus on that as we have done. And the success that you've outlined in relation to the tourism sector, we will continue. Now, the unavoidable truth, although the Deputy doesn't want to take lectures, is that the last 2 years of your term of office saw the collapse of 250,000 private sector jobs. We are now creating net 3,000 new private sector jobs per month. Your strategy that you personally espoused and pushed through this House of cutting the minimum wage as a tactic was the wrong one. Our tactic is not to have a low-wage economy, to rush to the bottom, to think you can create jobs, that you can create jobs,
Minister, over time, please. Thank you.
By pushing down the basic wage of people is not a strategy that this government subscribed to. And in the most difficult of economic times, we undid that damaging economic decision that you made. So, in conclusion, Ceann Comhairle, I can assure the Deputy, in thanking him for his belated acknowledgement of the successful strategies being pursued by this government, that we will continue with the next budget to ensure that jobs continue to be created.
Deputy MacDonald.
Ceann Comhairle. Minister, yesterday was just like every other day for thousands of families struggling with mortgage distress. Some are facing eviction, like the family in Canturk in County Cork, and there are many others who will be facing the same scenario. Yesterday was also the day that Governor Honohan appeared before the Finance Committee, and that meeting had a sense of the extraordinary about it. We know, quite rightly, that the public were scandalised when the Anglo Tapes first emerged in the media. We heard then firsthand the Moolah men describe how they picked figures from their posteriors, how they were going down to the central bank, arms swinging, demanding a multi-billion euro bailout. And yet, Patrick Honohan, the governor of the central bank, the regulator, tells us that they are not going to forward any further information on these tapes to the Office of the Director of Corporate Enforcement, or for that matter, to the Gardaí. He then further told us that he hasn't even listened to the tapes, or that staff on his behalf have not listened to the tapes in his possession, and he indicated that he wasn't minded to do so. Now, Minister, I ask you, isn't this simply incredible? So on the one hand, for the distressed mortgage holder, they have arrears, maybe with negative equity, stress, legal letters from the banks, court appearances in many cases. And yet it seems the bankers remain untouchable. Heads they win, tails they win. So I want to ask you, Minister, on behalf of government, are you satisfied with the manner in which the central bank and its governor have handled the Anglo Tapes affair?
Minister.
The Deputy first raised the issue of mortgage arrears in the context of the discussions that took place yesterday with the Finance and Per Committee and Governor Honohan. And I want to say firstly, before I go on to the second question, that the issue of mortgage arrears is an absolute focus of government, because it is one of the deepest scars left after the legacy of the collapse of the Celtic Tiger. And a lot of people are struggling desperately still in mortgage arrears. Willie, you have a brass neck. A brass neck.
Sorry, could we go through the chair, please?
I actually, Count Corla, I won't be distracted,
Yes,
because
please.
the issue of mortgage arrears is so important and so central to the lives of too many people for you to be making silly comments about it. You should be ashamed of your part in it. The government has put in place a comprehensive programme of actions to assist mortgage holders. The Personal Insolvency Act was signed into law last December. The Insolvency Service has begun taking applications from the 9th of September. The Central Bank of Ireland has set targets requiring main mortgage lenders to offer durable solutions. The Central Bank has launched a framework for a pilot approach. All the issues that we've listed out, and we can give you a comprehensive focus on that, because we are determined that this is an issue that will be resolved, and resolved it will be. It will take time, and it is very complex. In terms of the specific question about bankers and the tapes, every member of this government and every elected member on this side of the House was as shocked and bluntly as nauseated by listening to those tapes as I think the general public were. And it was characteristic of that attitude that prevailed in banking at the time. Now, I believe it has substantially changed, but I do believe that there has to be an accounting. But I'm not going to say anything here in the Dáil that would lessen the prospect of people who have verged over the edge of criminality being held accountable before the courts. And the prosecution services of this state, which are entirely independent of the government, as is right, have been working assiduously, gathering the information. And I think we all expect that there to be a conclusion to that will hold people to account.
Deputy MacDonald, 1 minute. Thank you.
Well, if that obnoxious, macho attitude was characteristic of the bankers, let's face it, the system, including the political system of the time, I think it would also be fair to say that what's characteristic of the system now is a sort of a hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil approach in respect of mortgage distress, because you see, you're all delighted. The government are happy that progress is being made, and you stand up and you give your answer by rote. I've heard it before from your colleague Eamon Gilmore. And the governor comes into the Finance Committee and, surprise, surprise, he sings the same song. Meanwhile, back in the real world, people are still under the most enormous stress, and they don't see a willingness to act. They don't see a willingness for accountability from the system, and they do not see those within the banking sector being held to account. I am not asking you, Minister, nor would I, in the Dáil or elsewhere, to make comments or draw conclusions around criminal culpability in anything. I am saying to you that when the regulator of the banks has in his possession, in the system's possession, tapes pertaining to the bank, when some of those become public and it appears that there has been a ruse to fool or even to defraud the state, when there's even a suggestion of that, is it not appropriate for the regulator of the bank to make bloody sure that all of the tapes are listened to and scrutinised, to make absolutely sure that information and material is passed on to the relevant authority? I would have thought that that was the most basic requirement of somebody who would claim to be a regulator. And I am asking you not to make a commentary on criminal culpability. You should not do that. I am asking you on behalf of government to say in this chamber that it is not appropriate for the governor to sit on his hands, that the material in his possession must be examined fully, and that the outcome and the materials itself be passed on to the Office of Corporate Enforcement and indeed to An Garda Síochána, investigative bodies, and let them then draw any appropriate conclusions. But let's not add to the public distress by them seeing the system yet again look away, punish the people and look away from those who must be held accountable.
The people of Ireland are hurting, and they're rightly angry, and they want an accounting, not some sort of denunciation from the benches here. They want a real accounting. Those who committed criminal offences should be held to account under the laws of the land. Now, we changed the law shortly after coming to government to give additional powers to the prosecution authorities. I'm confident that every shred of evidence that they require, and they're very competent people, will be available to them. They have the power to get it, to require it, and I have every confidence that that's exactly what they have done. I should remind the Deputy that we operate courts of law under the Constitution, not courts martial. And the law has to be assiduously, and I know that there are those who are more used to summary justice. We are interested in ensuring that the slow, painstaking, difficult task of giving every assistance to the prosecution authorities to ensure that where there is any criminality, that those people are held to account. And that we don't do anything that would give any shield or comfort to people who may have committed a criminal act to escape accountability. And that's what will happen under this administration.
Deputy Daly.
Corley, you're probably aware, Minister, that yesterday there was a briefing by the ESB group of unions here, representing 13,000 workers whose pension scheme has been unilaterally changed from a defined benefit to a defined contribution scheme, and now with serious funding problems, the cost of which is being transferred solely onto the shoulders of those workers. And these people now are about to join the tens of thousands of others in the PTSB, the Irish Aviation superannuation schemes, the Abbey Theatre, Waterford Glass, SRT and so on, who face the prospect of being pauperised after a lifetime of contributing to a pension scheme. And is it not clear that Irish society is now paying the price of an over-reliance on private pension schemes and the global capital market, and is failing to provide for people in their latter years? There's a pensions time bomb in this country that's been ticking for some time now. It's getting louder and it is going to explode. And the question really is whether your government is going to stand idly by or whether you're going to do something about it. And you don't even have to struggle that hard, because last week Social Justice Ireland came up with a proposal that would give you an answer to that situation, an opportunity to turn the existing policy on its head, to start with the belief or a fundamental principle that a retired citizen is entitled to the nation's gratitude and a recognition of their consideration, that they are entitled as a right to a guaranteed income and standard of living upon retirement. And you have an opportunity to deliver this through the Social Justice Ireland proposal on a universal pension scheme. Their plan is to replace the present 5 or 6 schemes of contributory, non-contributory, widows and so on scheme with one scheme, where a person over the eligible age is entitled to a pension based on their residency. This would give security to all, allow them plan for the future. It would get rid of the gaps that exist at the moment, where many people, particularly women who took time out to rear their children and so on, have lesser contributions and so on. It would eliminate the contributory philosophy, which puts value only on paid employment and not the old other contributions and so on. And the best thing is that it wouldn't cost you anything. In fact, it would save you money if you stood the present pension policy on its head and directed some of the massive tax concessions given to the wealthy into this scheme. So my question is, will you end a pension system which is based on tax reliefs which subsidise the wealthy and ensure that if you're poor in your working life, you'll be poor in your retirement, and replace that philosophy with the idea of a guaranteed decent pension for all on their retirement?
Thank you. Minister?
The Deputy has asked a series of questions, and I'll try and go through them as best I can. Firstly, she prefaced her comments in relation to the ESB pension scheme. The ES pension scheme is sound, and we should acknowledge that. Changes were introduced in the scheme last year by agreement with the workers. The new funding standards which have been set for all pension schemes, they've been set by the regulator, and their objective is to ensure that there is security of funding for pensioners into the future. And the application of that new funding regime is being examined right now, and that's what's happening within the SB. Within the broader pensions issue, again, it is not only an issue that Ireland is focused on, but all developed countries are focused on. Because you're right, a lot of private sector pension schemes have taken a massive hit because of the collapse of equity values. Now, a lot of those equity values are beginning to recover, so there is a more robustness in relation to the values of those pension schemes, but the criteria demanded by the pension regulators is increasing to ensure that there is a solvent, sustainable fund available into the future. So there's no question of us standing idly by. Minister Joan Burton has been very active in examining these matters, has had many debates here, and I'm sure you can pursue those with her. In relation to the specific proposal by Social Justice Ireland, I met with Social Justice Ireland together with Minister Michael Noonan last week, and we've heard the comprehensive set of proposals on this and a range of other issues. And like all the submissions, they will be very carefully taken into account. And finally, you talk about the tax benefits to private pension funds. As you know, Minister Noonan announced in last year's budget that we are ending tax benefits to any fund or to any individual once a pension of 60,000 euros had accrued. That's a fundamental change, and the legislation to enact that will be brought in shortly.
Deputy Daly.
Thanks, Count Corlett. The Minister is correct that it is, of course, an international problem, but you don't quite yet rule the world. But you are accountable for what goes on in this country, and you've singularly failed to address the issue which I posed to you, which was a very real, costed proposal which has landed on your desk, which raises the prospect of raising living standards for retirees in this state, and at the same time saves the state money. And if you like, it's an ideological question, and I understand that the Labour Party has lost a lot of its ideology. But the bottom line here is that we still have a society where billions of tax relief is weighted to the wealthy. 82% of tax reliefs go to the top 20%. 56% go to the top 10% of income earners here. If you stood that policy on its head, if you reduce the marginal rate of relief to the standard rate of 20%, if you reduce the earnings contribution cap to 75,000, which is twice the average, if you reduce the standard threshold of the fund, you could save the state more money by still introducing a universal scheme. And my question is the Labour Party going to distinguish itself in any way from its blue shirt partners when you depart this office? When you were on these benches, and your website actually still carries the sloganeering where you have said that the Pensions Board...
Sorry, would you please?
You have said on your website that the government, the last government and the Pensions Board have got it radically wrong, and that the government, at that time a Fianna Fáil government, should immediately...
Deputy, you're over your time. Will you put a question?
Thank you. Are you going to continue to subsidise the wealthy, or are you going to deal with decent rights for pensioners?
I've no views about ruling the world, but I thought that the deputy opposite was a traditional wobbly, uniting the workers of the world. I know all the times, the years I spent listening to you on the Administrative Council of the Labour Party, your good trot view of that. Unfortunately, being caught in the time warp of the 60s is of no value to us in terms of interpreting the economic crisis we have. So let me give you a few facts. You know, in truth, in the most difficult of economic times, we have maintained the old age pension rate, which, if you look at it, at €230, compare it to Northern Ireland or to Britain. Look at the additional benefits we provide. We have, by any objective analysis, protected the elderly, and rightly so, from the vagaries of the awful times we've gone through. Now,
We can't hear.
in terms of pension provision, we could take the line the Deputy is advocating of ensuring that nobody puts any private money into a pension fund and have an entire dependence on the state.
Thank you.
That is entirely unaffordable in the short term. What we are doing, for the first time, putting a cap on the pension that can accrue with state support. And I would have thought you might welcome that. But of course, you're too busy always to attack the Labour Party and the left, rather than look to attack the right and their views and what's happening.
Thank you. We now move on to